Hi y'all, welcome back to Daisy Dice, the YouTube channel where we talk about all things Salvadorians, whether Salvadoran history or stories about Salvadorians, just El Salvador all the way. Today, yes, I am in a new location again, and Will is not here. Those two things are connected. Will is currently working on his own project, and the room that I was in last video is actually our shared workspace. So he's in there right now working on his own project, and I'm out here in the living room, but that's okay. Today, I want to talk about Prudencia Ayala. Take a pause right now, comment below, have you heard of this name before? This was the first time I ever heard about her, and honestly, I'm confused as to how I didn't know about her before. Prudencia Ayala is the first woman, indigenous woman, that had the courage to run for presidency in El Salvador. This was back in the 1930s, so a little bit way back. And let me tell you all about her. Prudencia Ayala was born in April 28th, 1885. Let that sink in. 1885. That was more than 100 years ago from now. She was of Mexican indigenous descent on her father's side, and on her mother, she was Salvadoriana. She was born in El Salvador. Her mother was Salvadorian, and I'm not sure how the mom and dad met, but Prudencia Ayala was born. Prudencia Ayala was honestly super courageous, and she looked up to her mom. Some of the information I'm reading is in Spanish, so my brain is working overtime. Madre, una indígena que alcanzó el grado del coronel en lucha contra el régimen de los EZA. So Prudencia looked up to her mother because in El Salvador there was a president called Carlos Ezeta, who was president of El Salvador from 1890 to 1894. And the mother was ranked high in the military, como like a coronel. Is it coron? Like a sergeant, un coronel. I will put it right here what it is. And so she fought against the regiment of EZA, and the mother really went up there in the military. And this was a big deal because it was in the late 1800s and she was a woman. So Prudencia Ayala came from a lineage of amazing, powerful, badass women. ¿Quién es Prudencia Ayala? She was born in Sonsonate, El Salvador. Let me know if you heard about it or if you are from El Sonsonate. At the age of 10 years old, though, she moved to Santa Ana with her mother. I don't know if Prudencia grew up with just a single mom, but that's how I'm interpreting the information. So this was in 1895. They moved to Santa Ana for more opportunity because it was a coffee town. And remember the coffee oligarchy that we mentioned last video? When they moved to Santa Ana, Prudencia started learning about the trade union movement. So there was a lot of talk about unions within the workers of the coffee industry. And even though Prudencia was young, she was taking everything in. Prudencia also went to school, and she could only afford to go up to second grade, since I do believe her mother was a single mother. Prudencia was only able to complete up to the second grade, but she self-taught herself everything she knew in her life. And you will know more about what she published and what she did later in her life. So it's pretty impressive that she just had this innate gift of wanting to learn and wanting to just create in this world. Later in her life, to pay the bills and stuff, she did become a seamstress. At this moment, though, in Santa Ana still, she started having premonitions. She would almost predict the future sometimes, and some of her premonitions were came true. So people started really believing her, she was the real deal. Allowed her to have a section in the local newspaper. The newspaper was called Diario Occidente de Santa Ana. So in the newspaper there, you could open it up and see Prudencia's section, and you would see what premonition she was having. One premonition that did come true that was huge was the fall of Kaiser in 1914. Because of her premonitions, Prudencia's nickname was Sibila Santaneca. Sibila means Sibyl woman. Sibyl means woman in ancient times that uttered oracles or prophecies or were able to speak to God. Yes, so Prudencia Ayala later became a single mother of 2 children, and she was still being such a badass as a single mother, indigenous woman. All these factors and intersectionalities, the odds were kind of like society was against her. That did not stop her though from literally being a badass and continuing to speak up for herself as a woman and for women all over El Salvador. Because she was writing her premonitions and they were very successful, the director of the newspaper gave her way to have her own space in the newspaper and continue writing not only her premonitions but her opinions and rhetoric and conversation that she had. So she gave her space in editorials, which allowed her to publish in different newspapers in Guatemala and El Salvador. She actually spoke about Central American unionist thoughts, which is the first time I've ever heard of this. It's the thought of Central America just being one country together. I never heard of this before. I am so curious about it. I think I will. This might be my next video. I don't know if it was a great idea or not, but Prudencia Ayala was for it and she loved it. She also spoke about the inequality of women and men, which was in the early 1900s, this was like a sin. This was a big deal. She was speaking of things that nobody spoke about. And she was also a poet. And can I just say, I feel like every amazing activist that leaves an imprint in this world wrote poetry. I think poetry is such a way to express political passion and feeling. And among the things that she wrote, she also wrote about anti-imperialism, feminism, the Central American unionism, and she also expressed the rejection of dictatorships. I believe there was a dictator in Nicaragua, and she was really against that man and did not like what was happening there, and spoke out against the U.S. invasion in Nicaragua. So, mind you, I just want to really highlight that this woman was an indigenous woman and a single mother living in early 1900s in El Salvador. Even now, El Salvador is very conservative, I would say. And I don't know if I don't live there, so I don't know, but I could infer that machismo is embedded in our policies and laws still. So to be speaking this way in the early 1900s is very bold of Prudencia Ayala. And because of her boldness, in 1919, she criticized the mayor of Atiquizaya, and this led her to be imprisoned for the first time. She was there, I don't know for how long, but I don't think it was that long. I don't know. Because later that year, she went to Guatemala and allegedly she got accused of trying to overthrow the current government. So then she got imprisoned yet again. I honestly love this woman. She is a badass. I don't know where her kids were at this point, but it's really cool that it shows that just because you become a mother does not mean that your passions have to die. And I wish I could speak to her and ask her how did she juggle motherhood, or what was motherhood to her as well as with her, balancing her passion for activism and writing and all of that, because this is amazing what she did. And talking about writing, in the 1920s, Prudencia Ayala published 3 books. I want to read the titles of the books because I think it's really important. Her first book is Escible Aventuras de un Viaje a Guatemala, which speaks about her trip to Guatemala and how she got imprisoned. The next one is Inmortal Amores de Loca, and her third book is Payaso Literario en Combate. Even though Prudencia Ayala had been writing in the newspaper of Santa Ana for years and then moved forward and wrote for Guatemala and El Salvador in different papers, even then people still criticized her ability to write, and they will call her La Analfabeta, which literally translates for like someone who isn't able to read and write. She had proven herself multiple times. She had 3 published books, thousands of writings, like combined with her premonitions, published things in the different newspapers, as well as her poetry. People still, I'm one, I guess, men in power in that time still did not take her seriously. Not everybody though, because remember that guy in the newspaper in Santa Ana did give her way. So she did have some supporters that really believed in her intelligence and what she brought to the table. Okay, so all this happened. She published the 3 books in 1920, and in 1930 she found her own newspaper named Redención Femenina. So she had full authority to say all her what she really wished for the country El Salvador. And so she uses her platform to say what are all her values, her ideologies, and also announce her presidential race. I want to read some of her quotes that she wrote in these newspapers. The way she announced that she was running for president, it says, "Pensando seriamente en el estado inferior en que está colocado el sexo femenino, he lanzado mi candidatura para presidente de la República, para manifestar las actividades cívicas en las capacidades morales y mentales de la mujer." She said, "I've been thinking about it seriously. Even though I'm a woman, I'm gonna be president, and I'm gonna speak my mind and my truth." Hi, also, one more thing I forgot. Prudencia Ayala would walk around with a cane in her hand, because back then, and I think kind of now, like, it's associated with men, but she said F that, and she would walk around with a cane in her hand. Oh, another quote that I truly love that she says in her newspaper is, "Las mujeres según la Constitución somos ciudadanas, y lo mismo que nos menosprecian, no han rehusado la contribución de nuestra sangre cuando la patria ha corrido grandes peligros. Mi madre se batió en Santa Ana contra lasecetas y se le dio el grado honorífico de coronel." So basically, she is saying that according to the Constitution, women are citizens of the Republic of El Salvador. And she mentions her mother and how she was the coronel, or up there with the military. Another quote that I love that she says, it goes along the lines like, in Europe, queens had reigned kingdoms. So why is it in El Salvador women cannot reign the kingdom? And in her presidential campaign, she stood for various issues. And this was like, she told the world, she told El Salvador, I'm running for president, and this is what I'm standing for in her campaign. Some of it was public education, support for the working class, women's right to vote, non-discrimination against illegitimate children, and the suppression as much as possible of alcohol. When she announced this in her newspaper, she obviously had many haters, but she did have many supporters as well. One of them being Alberto Masferrer. He was the editor and writer of the Patria newspaper in El Salvador, and she said that what she was doing was a noble and a cause for justice. And so he backed her up publicly. And I think a lot of people did look up to Prudencia because her presidential candidacy became a public debate, whether she should be able to run for president or not. Sadly, though, the Supreme Court ruled that las leyes de la nación no concede ese derecho ciudadano a la mujer. In other words, the Supreme Court ruled that the nation's law didn't give that citizen right to the woman to run for president. So basically they said no because you're a woman. In this presidential election, a guy named Arturo Araujo won, and then literally he didn't do anything that he promised the people. So then his vice president, General Maximiliano Hernandez Martinez, took over. Honestly, Prudencia Ayala could have been president and a way better president than these two dudes, Arturo Araujo or Maximiliano Hernandez Martinez. But the Supreme Court had said, nope, you're a woman. And you know what? She said, okay, whatever. She continued writing. And in July 11th, 1936, she passed away in San Salvador. Her legacy was known, but not to the extent that it is known now. I will have the articles that I read linked below, like always. And one article that I really did like is her biography. So even though Prudencia Ayala did amazing things during her life, it was not until 1996 when one of her sons went to an exposition at MUPI, which is a museum in San Salvador, and they saw a picture of their mother, and this is where they kind of connected the dots, like, oh shoot, like we have precious things, keepsakes of their mothers. They had all Prudencia's writings and all her books, and this is where they gave that to the museum in San Salvador. It was amazing because now MUPI could put all her writings in the exhibition. So now it was no longer just one picture, it was her actual work and writings and ideas displayed for all of us to learn about her. Her lineage up until now, she has become a role model of coalition groups in El Salvador, and also led the precedent to the women's suffrage of El Salvador. Now we can vote as women. I think we can run for president now as women. And even though the country tal vez sí es machista, Ayala was ahead of her time. Doing this video as a mom, and I do have support from my partner, it's really difficult to kind of, you know, create things with young kiddos. But she was able to write 3 books, go to jail twice, run for president. I do want to be clear, she said she was running for president, but then the Supreme Court said no. So technically she didn't officially run for president, but she ran for president. Okay, she's an inspiration, and honestly, maybe one of us can run for president. A woman, a Salvadorian woman, maybe we can run for president in the upcoming years. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being so patient. I know I look super tired, but I really did want to get this video done because Prudencia Ayala does deserve to be talked about and to be learned about. So I hope you Google her. Look at all the links I list below. Oh, and also don't forget to subscribe, like this video, all of that. Bye.